Welcome to the Recruitment Hackers Podcast, a show about innovations, technology, and leaders in the recruitment industry. Brought to you by TalkPush, the leading recruitment automation platform.
Hello, welcome back to the Recruitment Hackers Podcast. I'm Max, your host, and today I'm delighted to welcome on the show Elena Valentine from Skill Scout.
Yes.
Hi, Elena. Welcome.
Thank you. I'm glad to be here. 3:30 p.m. my time and 5:30 a.m. Hong Kong time.
Oh, don't embarrass me. I try to come up as this person with social skills. Now everybody knows I work before everybody wakes up. Yeah, it's sad, but it's true. So Elena, thanks for coming and for taking time off your working hours to share your story with us. I connected with you after hearing your voice on LinkedIn, which, by the way, is getting increasingly populated with crazy content. I don't know if that's part of the strategy you support for your customers, but we've got a lot to cover for today's interview. I'm going to ask Elena how she ended up in the wonderful space of employer branding and production of content for employers, and how to give talent acquisition team an edge through content. And maybe if we're lucky, Elena will sing a little bit for us. I don't know. I didn't get it.
Depends how close we hit to the 20-minute mark.
Perfect. So yeah, Elena, tell us, how did you end up in employer branding? Did you grow up dreaming to be in recruitment?
Not at all. Didn't even
Neither
realize this. Yeah. I didn't grow up as a 5-year-old wishing I could recruit people to a company. I don't think that existed. But where my story does start is I'm a former design researcher that used to work, for design thinking, kind of an IDEO-like environment. And how this really came to be was because of a project that I worked on there as a design researcher that inevitably would change my life and that of my co-founder. And in particularly, it was a national kind of challenge here in the US around how do we connect 6 million young people to employment? And primarily young people who may not look good on resumes. Maybe they don't have a lot of job experience. Maybe, they've had to go through the juvenile justice system. And so how do we connect those who are not in school and the workforce to more meaningful pathways to employment? And that's where, we saw our lives change and what our purpose would be, which was we were talking to hundreds and hundreds of incredibly talented young people, of workforce development leaders, of employers. And what we saw loud and clear is that there was a hiring process that was shutting out non-traditional talent. And out of many of the challenges that were there, one of the things that we saw in particular was that you cannot be what you cannot see. And for young people who have never left their neighborhoods, they lack access and exposure to jobs. And so at the essence of what we started to do, even prior to founding Skill Scout, was just to film jobs in a very realistic and visual way so that young people could kind of see what these jobs were actually like. And it started to work. They started to put their phones down. They started to ask questions. They started to get excited. And that's when we realized that we had something that we could hack for candidates, this opportunity for them to really understand what jobs were like, but inevitably have companies to hack what it could be to really differentiate themselves, to provide more realistic previews for candidates so that they have an opportunity to self-screen and or self-screen out. And that was really the origin for why we started what we do.
Yeah. Well, thank you for reconnecting all of us and me to why we're in this industry. Yes, it's great to help people get to work and find employment and find a place in society. And I think whether you you got the best education in the world or you never graduated from high school, it's a real mystery what goes on in most people's jobs when you're at that age, when you're 20 something, when you're starting out. You just don't know what you're getting into. Job descriptions, they don't tell you anything really. They don't feel real.
Yeah. I mean, the whole thing was, that we saw was, look, job descriptions don't show what a job is like, and resumes don't depict a candidate's skills. And so, look at kind of what we're seeing over the past several years of, types of, be it technologies or approaches like ours, like yours, that are really coming into this market to, really help to demystify, provide a bit more transparency, provide a bit more humanity into, how we really care for, in our case, candidates.
And Elena, how does your business work? Do you typically work with a recruitment marketing team that says we want to run a big national campaign for our graduate hiring program? Can you make us look good? Is this kind of kind of agency type of arrangement, or is it more pay as you go? How does it work?
It's really any and all of above. So inevitably, we exist to capture the humanity of work primarily through the power of film. And so we work on behalf of agencies. We work on behalf of companies and employer branding, recruitment marketing leaders themselves who are looking to infuse content to support, be it the employee experience and, for our conversation, the candidate experience. And so what that might look like might be us, working to produce a job video or a cultural video, or, as we're thinking about the pandemic, we have so many processes that are changing. We have so many approaches to how we might be interviewing and what the candidate needs to expect that, right now we're actually creating a lot of content, new content that needs to be created so that, hiring managers can ensure that candidates are still having as much of a seamless experience as they can during this time.
Right. And even though the buzz is remote work from home and all that, the majority of jobs are still require physical presence, still require for people to come in and sometimes put on a uniform and do the things they do. So yeah.
Yeah. I mean, so for example, we recently worked with Kohl's. They're hiring warehouse logistics, distribution jobs like crazy. But even more importantly, they have to show the realities of today, because what candidates are paying attention for is, in addition to everything else, is how is that employer going to keep me safe, going to keep me healthy? And so we've certainly been working with, several companies that are having to not just rethink, the world is trying to rethink workplace safety right now as it comes to the pandemic. But
everywhere.
Even more so, when it comes to the questions that we know that candidates need addressed, how are we ensuring that we're telling the story of safety? And that's a really big one right now that we're seeing within kind of the candidate story cycle.
Do you have a big theme like this for every year you've been in business? Like this year it was, masks and gloves in your videos. And 2 years ago it was maybe something else. I don't know.
No, I like this. It's hard to actually define the trends as close as they are now. I will say when we started out, because, we had a focus, we primarily had built this business proudly on the shoulders of small to mid-sized manufacturers of the Midwest. So, we spent 2 or 3 good solid years really working on behalf of the tool and die makers and the CNC machinists and production operators and engineers. So certainly there's been themes like that in terms of work. Certainly in the beginning, it was around attracting young talent between, of a certain age. So that definitely was a huge theme then. So yeah, we've definitely seen some of those cycles, I think, in part because, from business owner to business owner, we're kind of pivoting and thinking through our focus. But it's certainly definitely shifted now. So
I'm thinking maybe it's because I work in talent acquisition, so I'm very exposed. I'm thinking I'm saturated. I'm like, safety. I mean, if everybody's talking about safety, then I need to, we need to latch on to a new theme or something else. But maybe that's me, I'm never looking for a job, but I'm always exposed. So I may be a little saturated. Perhaps it is still universally a driving force, I guess, for all employer branding campaigns right now to take care of their people. But I started as an entrepreneur, attracted to the kind of ethos of the startup culture of the Airbnbs of the world and the Netflix of the world, where is very performance driven, and it was not about safety. I'll say that. Yeah. It was about something else. So I'm just thinking that it must be difficult to differentiate yourself right now if everybody's talking about the same thing. So maybe that'll come back stronger. But switching gear a little bit, talking about video, do you have a position on whether video is better as user-generated content from the employees, scruffy and real, or polished and, manicured?
There's room for both. There's room for both. I mean, and I think maybe it's worth talking through the considerations of what that is, because we've seen it done really well on both ends. And in fact, we work with many companies where they literally leverage both professional video and user generated. Sometimes it's a mix. So I don't even necessarily know if it's about one or the other. Certainly there is data behind why user generated works. I think in part, we're all very used to social media. We see this as being most authentic and raw, right? There is data around that, says that, 55% candidates see employee generated content as, being more trustworthy, if you will. But I would say, typically what happens is, when
No
we're
more stock photos for sure.
no stock photos and that's
Do you still use
totally
actors?
no.
No actors. Okay, that's good.
No.
That means
It had happened.
if you come to a company, people should be on the lookout for you because it's their chance to be on camera.
Yeah, clearly. Getting back to the point of professional user generated, typically, for example, stories that might not change for a long time, or think about origin stories, founder stories, kind of missions and values, things that don't change. Oftentimes that's where we might see companies who are investing in more kind of high level professional quality video, especially because if this might be seen by even more kind of external audiences and communities. And sometimes it's just a capacity issue. You have a talent acquisition team, employer branding team that is just stretched so thin that their ability to, I think, be able to implement something like a user generated initiative just might be too challenging at the time. And certainly then there's things around budget. And sometimes the reason why companies might go to a professional video versus user generated is because of marketing and legal, right? And we know these companies where you might have these marketing brand watchdogs where it just might be just next to impossible for, the HR teams to get approved to be able to use user generated. So there's definitely some factors that are there for why.
That's going away progressively, where the stronghold on we want to control every piece of media that goes out. I would imagine it's eroding with time, but I mean, these are powerful forces, marketing and legal. So I don't want to.
For sure. I don't want
to.
And certainly I think that marketing and legal is coming around to it. I think part of that is also a need for control. And so we're kind of constantly seeing the tug of HR and marketing doing this.
It'll be an endless battle, really. Absolutely. It'll continue forever.
Yeah. And certainly the case for user generated content outside of the, some of the data I shared is one, you get to tell more stories more often. If what we're really trying to do is at scale, be able to tell a diversity of stories and experiences, this becomes a great way to do it. And because plus one, you're democratizing the tools. You're allowing anyone from any country, from anywhere they're sitting, to all primarily have access to things that they already have access to. And our big saying is, if you can take videos of your dog, cats, and kids, you can take videos of your workplace. And so there's, certainly kind of a level of access that everyone has. But then people are also thinking about a lot is how updatable are these videos? That's the biggest thing. As you know, roles change, events drastically change.
Oh yes. Your star employee will become a persona non grata. Yeah.
Exactly. And so that's kind of certainly a case, as we're working with clients long term where, every year we might update that video because it's evolved, or maybe in this case, the environment has changed in this manufacturing facility and everyone's wearing masks, that they want to be able to kind of provide some freshness to that video while still keeping some of the foundation. So I could go on and on about that, but yeah, those are the key factors.
Yeah, that's a question I always had talking about these employees that leave is, what about the content that they filmed before? Are you in trouble if you didn't get a release form and the right to use their image on your social media? Maybe you know the answer. I know you're not a lawyer, but...
I would say primarily most folks that might be participating in engagements that we work on typically are all signing media releases. And typically there is that language where, that employer, typically has kind of rights to that footage. However,
with you guys, I'm sure, but if we do like fully user generated content and we just kind of let the
Yeah.
let the dogs loose.
I think that really depends on the culture in the company. I think so much of that is typically defined by what are kind of the rules already in place for so many other things. And so you kind of get a sense already if that's the company that's like, oh, as soon as that person leaves, we're done. Or inevitably, look, if that employee still had a great experience and they're in a, a little fraction of a video, it may not be the biggest cause for concern.
Yeah, sure. I guess I'm getting my demo models, on the cheap, and I feel a little bit guilty asking my staff to play out on videos. So maybe that's where it's coming from. And well, you see some trends in terms of the way media is being consumed, the rise of TikTok and the new platforms. Does that affect the production work that you do? Are people, I would assume, wanting to consume shorter and shorter videos? It might be one trend. Are there other trends like that?
Yeah. I mean, well, first of all, more than anything, what we're seeing even back from when we started 6 years ago was that video is no longer a nice to have, it's a must have. And so that's certainly kind of becoming, even for some of your most traditional HR, unfortunately, maybe a check off the list. Certainly some of the big trends we're seeing is that, just the need for more and more content all the time, whether that's around celebrations or a project, right? It's never, here's this one big video initiative and we're pushing it out for this 1 year. It really all kind of happens over time. And it's a living organism, just in the same way that your workforce and your company is a living organism. So we've certainly seen a lot of trends around that. And certainly the user generated content, which is something that, we've kind of done really all the way from the beginning in terms of offering that. At this point now, for many companies, it may be the only way, right? You do have folks that are now all kind of working from home, and everyone kind of has to figure out, how do we still push out, quality content? How long do we wait? We've definitely seen an uptick in that. But I will
there's
actually
a lot of sorry, go ahead.
No, but I will actually, at least I push back. While it is true that candidates or anyone online is going for shorter and shorter and shorter content, sometimes it's not just because we have short attention spans. Sometimes it's because the content's bad.
Yeah.
And so, especially I think in kind of the new energy that I want to bring as a leader to Skill Scout Films is that, look, you could create incredible, beautiful 20-minute documentaries about someone's work. And the entire time that person doesn't realize that this might be someone who's really talking about a role. And so that's what I think is really interesting about storytelling, is that I would argue that.
Okay. Can you pitch us a story? This movie, are we going to go inside the life of a warehouse operator, a forklift driver? You can stretch that out for 20 minutes?
Yeah, we just might, if we're talking about just kind of, the changing kind of world of work. Absolutely. But it goes beyond, and I think this is what we're seeing, right, is especially for this Generation Z, our personal lives, our work lives are often one and the same. This is no longer separate. And so for me, what I see as being a good film that people resonate with is because it gets personal, is because you go behind the scenes of that person outside of their suit and outside of what you see on Zoom. And you really help to kind of understand the context of their lives. And even more so, really start to see, why is it that they do what they do? And what does bring them meaning?
I work with a lot of call center companies. And so they're not a consumer brand. So nobody knows about them, except in the countries where they hire. They're known as an employer brand, which gives them quite a lot of freedom, actually. Because if you're McDonald's or Coca-Cola, maybe you have a much stronger marketing department. You have less room to play. And it was like a beautiful campaign, I remember, by VXI, where it was a single mother that was talking about how work allowed her to send her daughter to school. These kinds of stories that just lifted everybody's hearts. And I'd like to see more of that, really. Kind of fallen off a bit.
That's what makes it all relatable. Like, I don't have to know about exactly what you do, right? If I were to see a film, right, about recruitment automation, et cetera, right? Some of that is likely to go over my head. But what won't, right, is when I get to see, hey, like he has this wonderful relationship with, his mother, or kind of look at how he's honoring his mentor, right? And these are all kind of life experiences that many of us have or have a connection to, negative or positive, but it allows us to feel something. And then allows me to even better understand, how you show up to work as a leader of TalkPush.
Okay, I'm going to give it a go. The Zoom revolution. Zoom was maybe the best performing communication platform of 2020, an opportunity for people to sing and get together on group calls. Did you use that medium to create some content last year, or is that just user generated? You let the companies handle that without any...
So I'm a heavy user and fan of Prezi, which is, originally a presentation tool, and they've come out with a really great video product. Yeah. And so, great for presentations, great for trainings, sales enablement, all that kind of stuff. So it's been a really cool product. I've been really excited to use it more as it just came out last year. Long story short, that is all to say, no, I don't sing on every presentation, if at all, ever. There typically never is a reason why I would break out into song during a sales conversation, but Prezi put out a fun challenge to create a 30-second video that they could, potentially leverage in a reel, and the winner would receive a $1,000 donation to the charity of their choice.
Oh, and did you win?
I did.
And did you give it to the Elena Valentine charity fund?
But I gave it to Mezgla Media Collective, which is a nonprofit that I helped to co-found. Yeah.
Okay. Great. And what does this nonprofit do? Well, we might as well do a little bit of advertising for it.
Yeah, we're a kind of a nonprofit community of femme-identifying filmmakers of color, primarily in Chicago and throughout the Midwest. So we started in 2017, and we've grown to well over kind of 600 community members.
Oh, congratulations.
Thank you.
Okay. Well, where can our listeners find out more about the Mezgla Media Collective and Skill Scouts, and what's the best way for them to get a hold of you?
Be my friend on LinkedIn. Let's start there. And however I can be helpful, either to myself or Skill Scout, we'll always find the right path for you.
We didn't do any singing, but I just don't know how to bring that up. Where can people log on to connect with Elena on LinkedIn? And maybe if they ask nicely, you'll send them a little... On LinkedIn, you can send a little voice note. Okay. Yeah, I hear that's an effective way to do sales these days. If I had your voice, I wouldn't hesitate a second.
Thank you.
Thanks for coming on the show, and all the best for 2021.
Perfect.
Inspiring words from Elena Valentine, CEO of Skill Scout, who reminded us that there's nothing like a personal story. Tell the story of why the people came to work for you, their personal story, and maybe as a differentiator in a world where everything is bite-sized and short, maybe this is an opportunity to go deeper and tell a long story and try to make a film that people want to watch. Hope you enjoyed it and that you'll come back for more. Follow us on your favorite podcast platform. Please share with your friends. Thanks.